fantastic, isn't it, to be here in the
In the hot box.
we've got Jesus in our lives. We don't need anything else.
Oh, I wish he was a fan.
Now look, before we get into the message, and it is the last day, and I feel privileged, honoured, and probably the best word to describe it is humbled. And you are, I never take for granted sharing God's word. And I've got to watch myself. I haven't cried for a while. It's been building up, so watch it. Anyway, it's fantastic to be here. In fact, I'll just share something which shocked Aileen yesterday. I don't even know I said it, but I did. You get up some days and you're down. You just don't feel right, and you got things happening in your body and you wish it wasn't, and you think, God, what's happening? And I said something pretty dumb to Aileen. I said, you sitting down, Pastor Rob? I said, I don't know whether I really want to be a pastor anymore. And Aileen looked at me and said, you what? I said, I don't know whether I want to be a pastor anymore. Anyway, she thought I was nuts. And she went into the bathroom. And I was at the kitchen table, and I had a little prayer. I said, God, what's happening? And the small, still voice come into my heart and said, you haven't made you a pastor. Pastor Rob hasn't made you a pastor. I made you a pastor. And I've got plans for your life. And then the warning was, if you don't want to do it, I'm going to get somebody else. And I could have fell on my knees. I said, sorry, Lord. I will never think that again. Anyway, what a great start. Oh. And look, we're not going to have a lot of time today for what I want to speak of, but before we get into that, Aileen has a vision, or should I say dreams, because older people have dreams, don't they? And she had a dream a few days ago, and she didn't tell me straight away, but she told me yesterday, the day before, whatever it was, because we sit down and every morning we'd sit in the lounge, get comfortable, hold hands, and we pray. Anyway, she says, I've had this silly dream a couple of times, and I really don't know what it means. And I said, well, tell me. Because she has all sorts of dreams, but she thinks they're stupid and won't say anything. Anyway, she told me. You want to say what it was, Aileen? Can you speak up? Come on. Loud so everybody can hear you.
It was just a dream where Nick and I were walking, and there was a feeling of something behind us that wasn't good. And we started to walk faster and faster to sort of get away from this feeling. And it started going up a very steep hill. And he was holding my hand and helping me up the hill. We got to the top of the hill, and the light was so bright that we couldn't stand it. You could feel the heat from the sun and the light. And we turned every direction, but this light and the heat was still there. And then we stopped, and I thought, there's nowhere where we can go to get away from this light and the heat. And a voice said, my son will never leave you.
Because when Aileen said that, she never twigged. She thought of S-U-N because of the sun. I said, Aileen, that's S-O-N. That's the Son. He'll never leave us. He surrounds us with his love, with his mercy and his grace. So I was just blown away, and I know Anne loves hearing this sort of stuff. And there's another one, Anne. This is another one. Like I said, we're going to run out of time, but hey, Just Jesus is in control. He's on the throne. Not yesterday, the day before. We read the Bible and Aileen bounces questions off me just to test me, to make sure I know, and I go and get my Bible and cheat. But anyway, she says, I don't know, in prayer, I was told Hope Valley. And I thought, well, that's strange, Hope Valley. She said that one morning, and I thought, oh, I'll get Mr. Google out. So, Mr. Google. Anyway, would you believe there is a church, a apostolic church in Hope Valley, which is the other side of Adelaide. And I thought, that's a bit weird. God want us to go there, the other side of Adelaide? No. Wiped it out of our head. The next morning through prayer again, Aileen gets the same message, Hope Valley. And cheeky me, being a bit of a smart so-and-so, she said, I don't know what it means. And I said, well, ask him. Anyway, she did. She did, silently asked, and instantly she got an answer the same time I did. And it said, Hope Valley is where you are right now. Because, as you know, we're going through some difficulties. We're in a valley, but he's given us hope. So I thought, wow, who said that God doesn't speak to you? He does. He does. We might hear an audible voice, but you can feel it. You can feel it. Great way to start. Now today we're going to be looking at Old Testament character. Surprise, surprise, I love it. When I start looking at these things, you know, you start to meditate on the Word, and they tell you to meditate on the Word, and it starts to come alive. It's just unbelievable. But I was going to start off with this, but I think we've covered it pretty well anyway. But have you ever gone through difficult times where things happen? You get one ailment and you're trying to get over that, and you get another one, and then you get another one, and then you get another one, and you think, where are you, God? Where are you? It's almost a nightmare. You wake up and you think, oh, everything's still there. Well, like I said, today we're going to be looking at a Bible character that went through a lot of stuff. Yes, dear. That's the last words, Rob. Yes, dear. And look, it's worth looking at this story. And this story you all know. When you hear it, you're going to say, oh, boring. But I'll tell you what, it's not boring. Everything that in this book is meant to be there because it's going to help us. Not help just the people in the Old Testament. It will help you today. It will help you now. So we're going to go through it. And as I read it, and I'd heard this message lots of times before, but it's almost as if God opened a veil and showed you that additional layer, something that you don't normally see. And I started jotting a few things down. And I thought, wow. And it's you're going to guess who it is. We're talking about a lad that was one of 12 brothers, Joseph. And the more you look at it, you think, far out, what a great story. And, it takes up a big chunk of Genesis. So if it takes up a big chunk of Genesis, it's got to be something pretty important, I would say. God put it there so we could learn from it. And it's just amazing. So look, I'm reading through from the New King James Bible. But you can follow it if you like. But if you don't, just relax. Listen to the story. We're going to elaborate a little bit on what happens. If you go to sleep, I'll throw something at you. I'll get Alex to get the camera and focus it on you. So I'll throw the Bible at you. Anyway, enough of that. So we're going to be looking at Genesis 37. Genesis 37. And we're not going to get through this today. This could be part 1, 2 and 3, but we don't have part 1, 2 and 3. So when we reach a point, which is coming pretty quick, we'll just fast forward and get to the end. You all know the ending, but it's just the process that he goes through, the things that God allows to reach his goal, his purpose, his plan. So it's just a fantastic story. So let's start off at 37:1. Now Jacob is Joseph's father, dwelt in the land where his father was a stranger, in the land of Canaan. This is the history of Jacob, Joseph being 17 years old. Remember that? He's a kid. 17 years old. He was feeding the flock with his brothers, and the lad was with the sons of Bilhah and sons of Zilpah, his father's wives, and Joseph brought a bad report to them to his father. Well, it mentions the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah, but in fact, his wives with Leah and Rachel. Bilhah and Zilpah, they get a mention in the Bible, they were their maidservants. So really you could say he had 4 wives. Anyway, so here's 17-year-old Joseph. You people that have had children, 17 years old, they think they know everything. You know nothing. You know, mum and dad, don't listen, goes in one ear and out the other. So here's this 17-year-old kid. He's dibber-dobbing on his brothers. So what his brothers were up to, because they were older than him, of course, he was the second, the youngest. So I don't know what they were doing, Dave. They could have been smoking weed out with the sheep. Can I say that? Okay, smoking grass with the sheep. Who knows? But, you know, Joseph didn't like this. He thought, no, I'm going to dob them into Dad, you know. It doesn't tell you what they were doing, but it must have been worthwhile taking note and going to Dad and saying, Dad, this is what my brothers are doing. Anyway, we'll read on. Now, Israel, let's get this right. Now, when I first became a Christian, I was very confused. When I mention Israel, I think, Israel? Who's Israel? But in fact, Israel is Jacob. And they changed his name from Jacob to Israel. If you read the story where we actually did preach on the ladder to heaven, you remember that? Anyway, now Israel loved Joseph more than all his children because he was the son of his old age, and he also made him a tunic of many colours. And we've all read that. You think, oh yeah. And when you think about it, a tunic of many colours, you can just envisage that this thing must have been something special. You know, in my mind, I've visualised that it's a coat, possibly a long coat with long sleeves, made of absolutely expensive material. It was almost king-like. It just made him stood out. And of course, there was many colours. It was noble. So much so that it almost gave the impression that he was above his brothers. He was better than his brothers. So when we go to 37:4, but when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, they hated him and could not speak peaceably to him. Now Joseph had a dream and he told it to his brothers, and they hated him even more. Now, 17-year-old, no brains. My dear old friend who's passed away, Wally, I've spoken of Wally many times, he said that kids don't get any brains till they turn 40. Well, if he was still around, I'm saying he's wrong, because anyway, we won't go there. But you know what I mean. Yeah, unbelievable. But, you know, they hate him. That's a pretty strong word. They hated this kid because he was a dibber-dobber and he was Daddy's favourite. And, you know, Daddy did everything for him, you know. It's just amazing. And, you know, it was his favourite because he was the son of his favourite wife, Rachel. But the word hate appears 3 times in these verses. They hated him. They wouldn't speak peaceably to him. They hated him even more when he was going to tell them about the dreams. And when we get to the dreams, so they hated him even more. So anyway, here's, you know, kid no brains. He says, I've got to tell you this dream. And the brothers are saying, oh, here we go again. Here we go again. So he said to them, please hear the dream which I have dreamed. There we were binding sheaves in the field. Then behold, my sheaf arose and also stood upright. And indeed your sheaves stood around and bowed down to my sheaf. And his brother said to him, shall you indeed reign over us? Who do you think you are, you little so-and-so? Or shall you indeed have dominion over us? So they hated him even more for his dreams and for his words. So, you know, to add insult to injury, he has another dream. And he said, then he dreamed still another dream and told to his brothers and said, look, I've dreamed another dream. And this time the sun and the moon and the 11 stars bowed down to me. 11 stars were his brothers. Anyway, so he told this to his father and his brothers, and his father rebuked him and said to him, what is this dream you've dreamed? Shall your mother and I and your brothers indeed come to bow down to earth before you? And his brothers envied him, but his father kept it in mind. He thought, we'll see what comes of this. We'll see what comes of this. Now we'll get to the next passage where Joseph gets sold by his brothers. So we'll just read on. Then his brothers went to feed the father's flock in Shechem, and Israel said to Joseph, "Are not your brothers feeding the flock in Shechem? Come, I will send you to them." So he said to him, "Here I am." Then he said to him, "Please go and see if it is well with your brothers and well with the flock, and bring back a word to me." So he sent him out of the valley of Hebron, and he went to Shechem. Now, the interesting thing, when I started looking at some of this stuff, where are we, 12? From Hebron to Shechem is about 50 miles. That's probably about 5 days on foot. That's a pretty good stroll for a 17-year-old kid. And then he gets there, and there was a certain man found him, and there he was, wandering in the field, wondering, where are they? You know, I've walked all this way and they're not here. What's going on? And the man asked him, "What are you seeking?" So he said, "I'm seeking my brothers. Please tell me where they are feeding their flock." And the man said, "They have departed from here, for I heard them say, 'Let's go down to Dothan.'" So Joseph went after his brothers and found them in Dothan. Now you think, how did this bloke wandering out in the sticks know where these guys? He said he overheard them, but how did he know they were his brothers? Well, maybe because there was 11 of them, maybe because they must have had a big flock of sheep. Because let's face it, it wasn't 11. Well, there could have been 11 out there, because he's got a younger brother as well, and it doesn't really clarify that in the word. But nevertheless, and isn't it amazing? When I thought about it, I thought, he's got 12 brothers, and they're all shepherds. No motor mechanics, no carpenters, no plumbers, no electricians, all shepherds. And you think, wow, they must have had a heap of sheep. A heap of sheep. Anyway, interesting that, he walked 50 miles, and then from where he is, the Shechem, he's got to go to Dothan, which is another 15 miles. So all up, this kid's walking 65 miles. That is unbelievable day. Unbelievable. Anyway, the story gets interesting. Now, as he's getting up to his brothers, they see him, and you can imagine what they're going to say. When they saw him afar off, even before he came near them, they conspired against him to kill him. They had him that much, they said, "We're going to get rid of this little kid. He's just talk about a thorn in the side." Then they said to one another, "Look, the dreamer's coming." Can you imagine? Yeah, the dreamer's coming. The dreamer's coming. "Come, therefore, let us now kill him and cast him into some pit, and we shall say, 'Some wild beast has devoured him.' We shall see what will become of his dreams." So they say, "We're going to sort him out. We're going to throw him in the pit, then see what happens. See what happens with his dreams then." And I sort of looked into it, a pit. I thought, pit, what do I mean by pit? But apparently the ancient Israelites used to dig a lot of pits, a lot of them in stone, and that could be up to 20 feet deep, and they collected water in there. So that's the pit. I mean, you can refer to it as a well, hole in the ground anyway. So they were going to chuck him in there. But going on from verse 21, but then Reuben, now Reuben being the eldest of the 12, heard it, and he delivered him out of their hands and said, "Let us not kill him." And Reuben said to them, "Shed no blood, but cast him into this pit which is in the wilderness, and do not lay a hand on him, that he might deliver him out of their hands and bring him back to his father." So Reuben's feeling a bit guilty. He's the eldest. I thought, these guys are going to kill him. You know, I'm the eldest brother. I feel responsible. I'm going to go back to Dad. You know, he's going to hold me responsible. They can't do that. So he talks him and, puts him into the pit, that later on he's going to come along, drag him out and get him back to Dad and all is sweet. So it came to pass, when Joseph had come to his brothers, they stripped Joseph of his tunic, the tunic of many colours that was on him. Then they took him and cast him into the pit, and the pit was empty. Isn't it great? They always meant just as well it was empty, otherwise we'd be swimming pretty hard. There was no water in it. So that's good. It was empty and it had no water in it. And they sat down to eat a meal. Then they lifted their eyes, and there was a company of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead. And, you know, and I think some version, we think of there's a caravan coming. And Dave, just for you, it wasn't a Jayco with a jeep towing it. It was, in fact, elephants carrying stuff for the Egyptians. And it tells you what it is: camels bearing spices, balm and myrrh, and on their way to carry them down to Egypt. Because that stuff was very valuable to the Egyptians because they used it for embalming. So Judah said to his brothers, and by the way, Judah's the fourth eldest, what profit is there if we kill our brother and conceal his blood? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hands be upon him, for he is our brother and our flesh. And his brothers listened. Wow. The Midianites traders passed by, so the brothers pulled Joseph up and lifted him out of the pit, sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 shekels of silver, and they took Joseph to Egypt. Well, 20 shekels of silver was about the going price for a young slave at that time. We read on. Boy, time flies. Then Reuben. This is Reuben. This is the eldest son that wanted to rescue his little brother. He returns to the pit, and indeed Joseph was not in the pit, and he tore his clothes. He thought, oh, he's dead. And back then they tore their clothes as a sign of mourning, as you know, they were shattered, that something terrible had happened. And he returned to his brothers and said, the lad is no more. In other words, I think he's dead. And where shall I go? He was thinking of himself, we're going to go back, and what are we going to tell Dad? What are we going to tell Dad? So the sneaky lot, they took Joseph's tunic, killed a kid of goats, and dipped the tunic in the blood to make out that he'd been attacked, ripped to pieces, devoured, disappeared, dead. Then they sent the tunic of many colours, and they brought it to their father and said. Now, the Bible doesn't say they took the tunic, they sent it. So in other words, a stranger would have found it, and that would have made the story more authentic. To say, well, we had nothing to do with it, we didn't know, this guy found it and brought it in. So they're a bit cunning. They've given this a bit of thought. Anyway, they brought it to his father and he said, we have found this. Do you know whether it is your son's tunic or not? And he recognised it. How could you not? It was a special thing, a one-off. He recognised it and said, it is my son's tunic. A wild beast has devoured him. Without a doubt, Joseph is torn to pieces. Then Jacob tore his clothes, put sackcloth on his waist, and mourned for his son for many days. And all his sons and his daughters arose to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. And he said, for I shall go down into the grave to my son in mourning. Thus his father wept for him. Now the Midianites had sold him to Egypt, to Potiphar. And then we start another story, an officer of the captain of the guard. So again, Jacob tore his clothes, put sackcloth, and that's what they did. When they were mourning, that's what they did back then. So now we jump to 39, Genesis 39. And I'll try to be quick because we're nearly out of time. Unbelievable. Joseph is sold as a slave. Now Joseph has been taken down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard, an Egyptian, bought him from the Ishmaelites who had taken him down there. The Lord was with Joseph, and he was a successful man, and he was in the house of his master, the Egyptian. And his master saw that the Lord was with him, and the Lord made all that he put his hand to prosper. So Potiphar saw this and said, I'm not going to waste this guy. He's pretty good. He must really have something on him. So instead of sending him out to the field, which most slaves did, they went out in the bush and cultivated or dug or whatever, he virtually gave him the job to look after the household. Everything. He was in charge of everything. So Joseph found favour in his sight and served him. Then he made him overseer of all his house, and all that he had he put under his authority. So it was from that time that he had made him overseer of his house and all that he had, and that the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake, and the blessing of the Lord was on all that he had in the house and in the field. Wow. Thus he left all that he had in Joseph's hand. He did not know what he had except for the bread which he ate. Now Joseph was handsome in form and appearance, so he was a good-looking kid. And tells you further down how long he was in there. I'm not sure whether it does or not, but when I researched it, he actually spent 11 years with Potiphar. That's a long time. And he did everything right. Anyway, it came to pass that after these things that his master's wife cast longing eyes on Joseph and said, lie with me. Whoa, things are getting a bit hot and heated. So here's Potiphar's wife. He likes this good-looking kid, so she wants to have a bit of fun with him. But what did Joseph do? He refused. He refused and said to his master's wife, look, my master does not know what is with me in the house, and he has committed all that he has to my hand. There is no one greater in his house than I, nor has he kept back anything from me but you, because you're his wife. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? So it was as she spoke to Joseph day by day, he did not heed her to lie with her or to be with her. But then it goes on. She's a cunning woman, this woman. But it happened about this time when Joseph went into the house to do his work and none of the men were inside the house. So she took the opportunity. You know, if anybody else was around, she couldn't do what she wanted to do. So she waited till there was nobody else in the house. Joseph was in there by himself, so she thinks, what an opportunity. I'm going to grab him. She caught him by his garment, saying, lie with me. But he left his garment in her hand and fled and ran outside. So must have been pretty close. She went up to him and he'd saying, no way, this is not going to happen. It's just not on. So she grabbed him and took off, and she ripped off his outer garment and he took off outside to get away from her. And so it was, when she saw that he had left his garment in her hand and fled outside, that she called to the men of her house and spoke to them, saying, see, he has brought into us a Hebrew to mock us, having a go at her husband. He came to lie with me, and I cried out with a loud voice. And it happened, when he heard that, I lifted my voice and cried out that he left his garment with me and fled and went outside. Well, I'm going to stick to the Bible, people, otherwise we'll never get to the end. We're not going to get to the end anyway. Okay, so you got the whole picture. So when her husband comes home, she said, see what you've done? You've allowed this Hebrew slave, so she used his ethnic background and also his name. He was a slave, which was degrading. Hey, look at the slave that you bought. Look what he was trying to do to me. So poor old Potiphar, I reckon Potiphar knew she was a bit of a shady character, his wife, but it was his wife. It was his wife. So, you know, he could have taken it that, you know, he was doing this, he was trying to take over everything I had, even my wife, and that would have been execution. But Potiphar must have had second thoughts. He said, just to keep face, throws him in jail. I'm really fast-forwarding this, really fast-forwarding. Anyway, gets thrown in jail. He's in jail for 2 years, by the way. So he started off at 17. He was 11 years with Potiphar. He's 2 years in jail. Do your maths. 28, 30, right? He's 30 before he gets out of jail. But anyway, you know the story. He's in jail. He's that good in the jail. The jailer puts him in charge of the people in there. He was that good. You know, you're just looking after everybody. So what happens? The baker and the I'm going to say the candlestick maker, the baker and the cupbearer, the butler, get thrown into jail. Get thrown into jail. So he's put in charge, look after these guys by the jailer. So he was doing a great job. These two guys have a dream. They've got no idea what the dream is. And young Joseph said, I can interpret dreams. God can interpret dreams through me. What are they? So they tell him, and I won't go into all the details, it'll take forever. Cut a long story short, the dream says that you're going to be reinstated and you're going to lose your head in 3 days. Blow me down, they get out, they go back to the king, and that's what happens. Now, Rob mentioned cupbearer earlier. Cupbearer was a very important job in the palace. You know, you have to be very trustworthy because it was easy to poison the king. And I can remember seeing some movies, whether it's right or not, that they had to have their drink before the king, because if anybody's going to fall over, it'll be them first. And the same with the baker. He had to, you know, he was looking after all the food. Again, cut a long story short, they get released. Before they get released, they say, hey guys, when you go back with Pharaoh, remember me. Remember me. Because I've done nothing wrong. I've done nothing wrong. I've landed in jail. You know, this is pretty hard. 2 years stuck here. But, you know, anyway. They go back to Pharaoh, and as he explained the dreams, it happens. It happens. Now, guess what? The Pharaoh has a dream. And he gets all these magicians, all these people trying to interpret the dream. Nobody could really interpret it. Anyway, that's when call him the cupbearer, says, hey, Pharaoh, there's a guy in jail. He interpreted our dreams, And they come true. I was reinstated and the baker lost his head. Perhaps he can tell you what your dream is. Pharaoh says, well, don't waste any time, go and get him. So I don't know who did this, but they shaved him, put clean clothes on him, looked like a really smart guy, goes up to Pharaoh and said, Pharaoh, what's your dream? Pharaoh explains to him what's going on. Anyway, again, to cut a long story short, they're going to have 3 years of famine, 3 years of plenty. Or 7 years. 7 years, isn't it, Rob? 7 years. Anyway, so he says that to Pharaoh, and Pharaoh's impressed that these things do happen, they come to pass. And Pharaoh's that impressed with him, he puts him in charge of everything. In fact, he's the second in command of Egypt and all surrounding lands. And it's an amazing story. And like I said, you could do 3 sermons and still run out of time. But if you remember back to the first dreams he had with his brothers, you tend to focus on that. I said, yeah, his brother's going to bow down to him. But guess what? They do. Because when there's a famine in the land where his brothers and his father were living, they're going to starve. So Jacob said to his lads, you better go to Egypt and buy some food, otherwise we're going to starve. So they go to Egypt, and because they face Joseph. They didn't recognise him. He was older. He was all painted up, the Egyptians, with a nice eye makeup. You know what we're talking about? They didn't recognise him. But anyway, again, cut a long story short, he reveals himself to them. And that's where that famous quote, if I can quickly find it, 40 I think it is. 50, 18 to 20, sorry. Okay, and you all know this one. Then his brothers also fell down before his face, and they said, behold, we are your servants. Joseph said to them, do not be afraid, for I am in the place of God. But as for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, in order to bring about, as it is this day, to save many people. So it wasn't just that the brothers were bound down to him. God had a plan. God knew all these things were going to happen, and it started off, just quickly recap, it started off that he was a brat of a kid, right? His brothers hated him. They sold him twice. They sold him to the caravan with the Jayco and the Jeep. Yeah, they take him to Egypt, he's on the slave block, Potiphar buys him. Anyway, how can things go bad? God had a plan. He's in the pit. How can that be good? You know, he's sold as a slave. How can that be good? Potiphar buys him. This is good. This is looking good. His wife tries to seduce him, gets thrown in jail. How's that good? It's just incredible. Then he gets reinstated. He gets made second in charge of Egypt. That is good. That is good. But you can see the plan unfolding right from the start. And the things that we go through today, the things Aileen and I are facing right now, you wake up every morning, something else hurts, and you think, God, what is happening? What is happening? He's got a plan. We've got to trust. We've got to trust him. He has a plan, a purpose for our lives. It's just incredible. When you read that story, it comes alive. And I've made a lot of little notes that they were quite funny, actually. But that's the story. That's what it's all about. And you think, wow. Wow, who says the Bible doesn't apply today? It does. We're all facing stuff. All of us. Some more, some worse than others. But we've got to put our faith, our trust. And he's a merciful God. He loves us. We're his children. You know something I learned the other day? I was reading a book. And I'm trying to change the way I pray. Not that God expects it. But we've got to realise that when we come to God, Pastor Rob mentioned this morning, we've got to come as little children. Right? Little children, they say what they think. They don't think, oh, is this the right thing to say or whatever? And we tend to sanitise our prayers, don't we? We sort of think about it, say, oh, God, you know. But one thing that I didn't do in my prayers, I always started my prayers, Lord, I'm trying to change. Our Father is our Father. We've got to realise we're his kids. We've got to come to him with a childlike faith so he can bless us. He doesn't want to hurt us. He wants to have a relationship with us so much that he sent Jesus on the cross to die for us who didn't deserve it. It's just absolutely amazing. What a story. What a story. And that's just a little glimpse. You could preach for years out of this and still not get it all out. Anyway, we're just going to wrap up quickly. Very quickly. Here we go. So I've called it Steps to Realise Fulfilled Vision. The life of Joseph powerfully displays God's sovereignty, ability to bring to pass his destiny for an obedient individual. In his youth, Joseph received a vision of God's plan for his life. Shortly thereafter, it appeared that not only had the vision died, but that his life would be wasted away in slavery and in prison. Nevertheless, Joseph remained faithful to God, that which had been meant for evil. God used to prepare and position his servant to realise the fulfilment of his vision for Joseph's life. Now, just a couple of points here and we'll finish. So what we've got to do, ponder God's vision. Do not share it prematurely, but ask for God's timing. Don't be like 17-year-old and you start blabbing things. Just speak to God first. Expect God's favour in sight of others. God is able to make a way even when it seems impossible. As we said, everything is possible through God. Remain faithful to God in all you do. Do not compromise, especially when the vision is slow in coming. Because it's so easy for us to give up, isn't it? Things aren't happening. Well, I get up every morning, I'm still aching, and I think, Lord, what's going on here? But we've just got to put our trust in him. Remain faithful. Do not compromise. Believe that God is sufficient. He has given you the gifts you need to realise his purpose through you. And trust. We've got to trust. Trust his sovereign providence. He causes all things for you, for your good. Romans 8:28 jumps out at me whenever I read stuff like this. As you remain faithful to his calling and purpose for you. Well, all I can say is, wow, what a story. What a story. And look, I'm sorry I rushed through that, but it was just been put on my heart. I've been thinking about it all week. And even when I go to bed with my aches and pains, I couldn't get all the stuff out of my head. And I'm thinking, what a great story. And it takes up so much of Genesis, so it's got to be really important. We all needed to hear it. We all needed to hear it. Anyway, let's bow our heads in prayer. Father, here we go. I'm not saying Lord, I'm saying Father. Father, we come to you as little children, looking for your love, your mercy, your grace. We know you're a compassionate, loving God. You sent your Son to die on the cross for us while we were still sinners, Lord. We've just got to put our total trust in you, Lord. Not let the world affect us. Not let the world guide us away from your word. When everything's coming against us, when we got pains, when we got bad reports from the doctors, when our bank book is in the red, whatever it is, when our children are going away from you and getting in all sorts of trouble, we just got to focus to you and pray. Pray, Father, Father. It's the Lord's Prayer. Father who art in heaven, who art in heaven. He wants to give us everything. We're his children. And we've just got to realise that. We just can't, it just goes over our heads a lot of times. I've got to keep pulling myself up and saying, Nick, what are you doing? Turn to him. Don't do it in your own strength because it won't work. So, Lord, we thank you for today. It's a momentous occasion, being the last day, Lord, and we thank you for everything that's happening here. And, Lord, as Pastor Robert said in the past, don't think of these years that we've had in this place or other place that we've had as a failure. This has been a setting up to step out. I honestly believe that God has prepared us for a time like this. Have a look at it. 3 years ago, who would have thought I was going to be a pastor? Somebody said to me, you're going to be a pastor. I say, yeah, in your dreams. You know, who thought David and what's your name again? Kate was going to be out here. Young Steve and Leanne and Anne and Harry. It's just amazing. God has deposited in so much to us. And I know we're going into a church where there's pastors there. And we may not get an opportunity, or we may get an opportunity, but God has a plan for us. He knows where we're heading. All of us, each one of us, he knows. And all this stuff that we've learned through all these years have been deposited in us. It's not going to be a waste. God does not waste anything. He will use it for our good and his glory. Amen.